It can be tough to articulate what it is that makes a game great.
Who could have predicted that people would want to play City Manager?
You can't necessarily count on the big guys to deliver you a good game. So, what about the little guys?
Plants vs. Zombies and World of Goo. Wow, 3 people can make something this good?
We thought Among Us was done, and then it exploded exponentially.
What is this magic combination, this alchemy that makes a game work?
The history of game development is littered with failure. Shut up! Both hardware and software.
I hope she made lots of spaghetti.
There's even an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to commercial game failures, and it is long. And then there's the surprise successes and the sleeper hits. And it makes you wonder, is there a pattern we can find in all this? And if so, what do the people who make games learn from it? On this episode of Reset, we'll talk to game developers past and present, and a historian, in an attempt to unlock the mystery of why some games fail, some become legendary, and a rare few manage to do both. Just be real with you, we don't have any easy answers for you. But what we do find might just change the way you think about the games you love, and the games you thought you hated. This is Video Game Valhalla. From the arcades to the consoles, the games to the concept art, it's all here at the Strong Museum of Play. In addition to a whole bunch of just cool pieces of video game history.
We have a lot of early Atari games. We have one of our copies of Pong. You have some classic pinball here, more arcade games down here. A game like this, you see why it's called pinball, because you actually have pins in there. You have something like the Virtual Boy, a foretaste of VR and virtual reality. Touch Me is an interesting game. Dominoes, many Broderbund games, Computer Spaceball, or Robbie the Robot that came with the Nintendo Entertainment System. We established the World Video Game Hall of Fame at the Strong in 2015 to recognize the best and brightest of video games. We already had the National Toy Hall of Fame and used that as a vehicle to recognize the most important toys of all time. And as our video game collection grew, there also was recognition that this was an opportunity to elevate video games as a form of media that I would say is probably the most important form of media of the 21st century.
There are currently 24 games in the Hall of Fame. You've probably heard of most of them. Games like Doom, Tomb Raider, Final Fantasy VII, you know, the classics.
Exhibits can sometimes be about enshrining a set of beliefs that people already have as much as it is challenging them or introducing them to new things. But What's There, I think, does a pretty good job of showing the range of what games have looked like since their conception.
We wanted to approach it thoughtfully, not necessarily just the game that was most famous, but think about what are the criteria that determine what makes a game great. And so we picked 4 different criteria: icon status, geographical reach, longevity, and influence. And so while I wouldn't say the World Video Game Hall of Fame is a canon exactly, it is giving an education in what makes a game great.
Now, what makes a game great can be a little hard to define, but if you're gonna try, you might as well ask somebody who knows the history. For example, OG legend Warren Spector. He's been at it for almost 40 years, and he's crafted an impossibly eclectic range of great games, like Deus Ex, Thief, Ultima, and Epic Mickey.
The most important thing about a game that gets perceived as classic is that there be some coherent vision behind it. That was true 30 years ago when we had teams of 1 to 10. It's even more true today. I mean, the last project I shipped, we had 800 people on the team, which, by the way, I will never do again.
While some of the titles in the Hall of Fame probably seem obvious, some of them might seem kind of surprising. Stuff like Microsoft Solitaire and Bejeweled.
A game like Bejeweled, when it came out, was thought of as like a woman's game or a girl's game. And frankly, it's also an easy thing to fall into the trap of kind of internalized misogyny and stuff like that. It's bright gems smashing into each other. It's not particularly difficult, people would say. Those people have never played Bejeweled, which is a pretty hard game as far as puzzle games go.
There are a lot of games that have surprised me in their appeal. You know, even going back to Will Wright's Sims games, who could have predicted that people would want to play City Manager? If I had pitched something like that, I would have been laughed out of the room.
Every year, there's debates around what title to induct in the Hall of Fame, and it raises questions about what's important in a game. Should you look more at the technical innovation or the artistry? Did you take into account how many copies of the game sold, or does that not matter?
So I think of a game, for instance, like the Oregon Trail. Kids today probably don't play the Oregon Trail unless they're on a sort of retro gaming site. But it was an extremely influential game in terms of charting a path for educational games. That video games can be a vessel for learning as well as a form of entertainment.
You might find yourself disagreeing with some of the games that are in the Hall of Fame, and that's fine. Nobody's gonna agree here, not even the experts. And that's part of what makes this question about what makes a good game so interesting.
I remember the first time I played Ultima 4, it changed the way I thought about games almost completely. Games can be about more than just killing everything that moves and grabbing the treasure. It was about, you know, who do I want to be in this world, which was very much what I loved about Dungeons & Dragons as a tabletop game. Realistically, every game I've worked on has been about trying to recreate the feeling I had when I played Dungeons & Dragons with my friends. That's kind of the sad, pathetic truth of my career.
You know, I think we throw around the word great very, very quickly, and often for reasons we don't necessarily know why we're using it. It can be tough to articulate what it is that makes a game great. And the truth is, in my mind anyway, it's a combination of factors, right? It can be something about the way it innovates. It can also just achieve kind of a high quality of what's already out there. Like, oh yeah, this is basically like these other games I really like, but it's a little bit faster, it's a little bit smoother, the character designs are a little bit sharper, and that can be greatness.
Everyone loves talking about the great games of the past and why they succeeded, and the big companies are constantly strip mining their classic releases for new profits. But what about the bad games, the ones that flopped? Where's that museum?
Failure is such a tricky, slippery idea, to the degree that sometimes something from the outside can look like a failure, but from the inside, it's hit all of its internal metrics. There was a time when a new Assassin's Creed game was a big deal because it felt like it was making a mark on the year. But in a sense, the fact that those games have continued to get good ratings and continue to kind of sell decent amounts every year has still been a failure because it stopped controlling the conversation. It stopped being a destination game the way it once was.
Failure in video games is an interesting question because it opens this window into what is the nature of video games? What is this magic combination, this alchemy of play and story and video and art that makes a game work?
And we haven't even opened up the can of worms that is Cyberpunk 2077.
This might have been the video game drama of last year, when the company that brought us the beloved Witcher 3 finally released the game that they've been teasing for damn near a decade. And it was so buggy, they not only removed it from the PlayStation Online store, they went a step further and gave people refunds. Remember, this is a game that cost over $300 million to develop. It was too big to fail, and yet it did, right out the gate.
You could look at it as emblematic of this process of creating major AAA title games. Meanwhile, there's a sort of this fail fast mantra that's coming out of Silicon Valley that, you know, get something out and change it quickly. Or you could tell it as emblematic somehow of our social media age. You know, so much of the reception of that game was driven by how people on Reddit and Discord and Twitter were talking about and sharing glitches.
Blow it up. Oh, yes. Wow. What? Okay, wait a minute.
And how did all these things intersect? And there are probably dozens of other stories that you could tell about a game.
Now keep in mind, the historical jury is still technically out on Cyberpunk. It could very well ride a wave of patches and fixes into video game greatness. And even if it doesn't, it's already done pretty well financially.
Now, granted, that's not going to stop the memes, the Reddit posts, and the really long YouTube rants, but hey, that just makes the story all the more interesting. And maybe we all learned something here, that you can't necessarily count on the big guys to deliver you a good game. So what about the little guys?
Coming up next, we'll meet two small companies who cut their own path and are behind two of the biggest games we've been playing over the last year. I'm up in San Francisco to hang out at the offices of Supergiant Games, an indie developer with a 10-year track record of fan-favorite games like Bastion and Pyre. Last year, they released Hades, a quirky dungeon crawler where you defy your dad, who just so happens to be the Greek god of the dead.
Goodbye, Father.
As you hack and slash your way out of the underworld. And that game has been winning Best Game of the Year left and right, even beating out the big budget AAA releases. And who knows, maybe I'll figure out the magic formula for indie game success.
This is the main area where normally we would be working and normally it would be less messy. We got out of here in a hurry.
Wow, people really did just bounce. I got, somebody left their Switch.
Yeah, exactly.
What's this down here? You got an email printed out? Congratulations. Bastion's been selected to be included in the PAX 10 for 2010.
Yeah. What's the date on it? Yeah, July 1st, 2010.
2010? That is over 10 years ago.
The 7 of us who worked on Bastion, we're all still here.
Yeah,
Like,
wow.
or up to about 20 people, but that includes the 7 people who
The
worked on
OGs,
Bastion. So
yeah. That's pretty cool, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Supergiant is kind of a rarity in the world of indie gaming.
That is. Woo, that's a big boy. Okay.
Despite a marketplace that's more crowded than ever before, they've not only been able to survive, but thrive in a world where most of the attention goes to big studios pushing out big franchises.
Everyone who works at Supergiant fits in this room.
The whole company fits in this room here.
Yeah.
Wow.
The fact that we could just pile in here and have a conversation and make a decision together has been like pretty core to how we work.
In addition to staying small, the founders at Supergiant have something else going for them. An eclectic set of what you might call previous lives. Among other things, Greg Kasavin was a games journalist before he got involved in development.
The Red Alert 3 poster behind it is a fun
Yes.
one. That was a game developed at Electronic Arts, but that's a game that I worked on along with Amir Rao and Gavin Simon, who are the co-founders of Supergiant. So I met them working at EA
Right.
on real-time strategy games.
So you're a big company, right? EA. And then 2 of your friends say, hey, we have this 2-person game studio that we don't have a name for it yet. You want to come make some games with us? What made you want to leave?
We were really inspired by some of the smaller independent games that were happening at the time. We were working on, these kind of relatively big productions by day, and then by night we'd go home and play, these games like Braid and Castle Crashers and Plants vs. Zombies and World of Goo. But then you would, look at the credits and see that, 3 people or something made this whole thing, and you'd be like, wow, 3 people can make something this good? Because here, we're struggling to make something with like 100 people.
So I should back up a little. When I said that Hades came out in 2020, that wasn't quite accurate. That was the official release. But a lot of people had already played it, because in 2018, Supergiant put out the game via a kind of pre-release called Early Access that allows dedicated fans to playtest the game before it officially comes out. While this isn't exactly unique, it's certainly not something the big companies tend to do with their tentpole releases. And on top of that, Supergiant even let a documentary crew from NoClip follow the whole thing.
All right, publish now. Test my typing. What's your age now?
It's gorgeous.
Look at that.
Putting out your game pre-release doesn't always work out. Some games never end up leaving that early access purgatory. But when it does go well, like in the case of Hades, everyone wins. Gamers get a taste of something they like, developers get a chance to try things out, and most important, a relationship, and maybe even loyalty, develops in the process, as gamers see developers taking their feedback seriously and using it to improve the game.
There's a lot of game companies out there who make hugely popular games, and people hate the companies, right? If I go into any comment section of any video about one of y'all's games, it's constant love.
Brand loyalty isn't the same as like sort of the human loyalty. And I think like a smaller studio has that kind of advantage where it's easier to tell that it's just a group of humans. The tragedy is, at big companies, it's also just a group of humans. It's easier to have empathy for like a smaller ragtag indie developer in San Francisco than it is for, you know, a megacorp. But of course, it only works if you're producing stuff that people enjoy.
The thing that's really interested me has been that discussion about where games should be going.
Yeah.
When you were a kid back in the days, if you wanted to make a Nintendo game, good luck.
You can't do it.
You can't do it. Yeah, the tools are not there.
On the one hand, you know, game development is super democratized, and it's never been more accessible than it is now in terms of like the free, you know, professional grade tools that are available. The quote unquote downside of that is that the competition is immense, and there are extraordinarily talented people, you know, all over the world working day and night, you know, to try to get their game in front of people. And so it's harder to cut through. More people in more parts of the world can more readily make games. I have to like latch onto that as a beacon of hope, of like, that's the path forward.
The rise of user-friendly game-making tools and easier access to distribution played a major role in another one of the biggest video game success stories of 2020, Among Us. Marcus B is one of the three-person team at Innersloth.
I have wanted to make games since I was like 7 years old. I used to make these platformers on paper, just like I would draw like a side-scroller world and then you'd go through it with your finger and imagine it in your head. I didn't think about how to actually make that come true. I thought that you could bring this stack of game idea papers to Toys R Us and you pay them $30 and they'll make the game for you. When I started to realize like, oh, you can just like find things online that help you make games. It's like, oh, hey, I'm making games.
So will the democratization of game development mean that great games are that much more inevitable?
I've always had this kind of naive stance that if your game is really good, people will find it and it'll get the attention it needs. I don't know if that's true. I don't think it really is, but that's been my like thing that pushes me.
Honestly, it's probably not. Look at the Steam store right now, and there are tons of games there. A lot of them are probably great, but they're hidden, and they'll never blow up. And for the first 2 years, Among Us was one of them.
We thought Among Us was done. We're just gonna, you know, support it until people don't want to play it anymore. The biggest challenge is just getting eyes. It's standing out, but like, you have that one streamer who just knows a bunch of other big streamers. That's like sort of where we see the start of this is different, and we definitely didn't recognize it at the time. And then so it exploded, you know, exponentially. There's so many people that things start breaking. You have to like redesign and re-architect around this massive influx of players. And so we ultimately ended up getting up to just under 4 million players concurrently.
So whether indie titles like Hades or Among Us will sit side by side with the big budget titles of the past in the World Video Game Hall of Fame is an open question. But one thing is clear, gaming has gone through a radical transformation. Fans have more access to the development process, and developers have more paths they can take to becoming that next sleeper hit. Coming up, the Reset Roundtable talks about the indie games that won our hearts over the last year. We're back, and it's time to break it down with the Reset Roundtable. Joining me this time are the host of Waypoint Radio, Austin Walker, and the games journalist behind NoClip, Danny O'Dwyer. What's up, y'all?
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having me.
It possibly is the best time to be a fan of games right now. It's probably the best time in the history of gaming to be a fan of games because there's so much out there. And it's got to be really interesting to be a game developer because it's so much easier to make a game. The flip side of that is it's so much easier to make a game.
Yes.
Everybody's making games.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's so hard to not get just lost in the current of the flood. I mean, you talk to indie games developers all the time. How are people feeling right now about launching games in 2021?
Yeah, it's hard. It's, you know, we had that sort of inflection point a couple of years ago where some of those really good indie games came out. Once digital distribution became more standardized, that's when the floodgates opened on that, right? I think it's incredibly difficult these days just because getting any sort of mind share with the audience is very tricky. And we've seen it with a game like Among Us, where you make a game that is ostensibly a good game. People like playing it, but you need some sort of magic wand in the public to be waved. You know, you can spend a lot on marketing, and that helps.
The future's yours for the taking.
Certainly helps games like, you know, Cyberpunk, for instance, had a huge marketing push, and that probably contributed a lot to the amount of units it sold in its first couple of weeks. But without that, you're sort of, I don't know, you're throwing your lot in the air and seeing where the wind takes it, and it's very, very tricky these days.
I think the interesting thing about playing games in 2021 recently is that everybody's a critic. And I mean that in a really great, wonderful way, right? Because if you wanted to really think deeply and think hard about games back in the Super Nintendo era, right, 64 era, I mean, what are you gonna do? We did not have an area where, you know, you can put out your own thoughts about it. Maybe you print up a zine, what are you gonna do, right? It's GamePro is doing that for you. Now, people have a YouTube channel, people have whatever it is, and there are so many more voices that we can talk about. This is where this game succeeded.
The other thing that's different now is, and this speaks to what you were saying, is like you have your SNES game, you play it, you're like, oh, it's real buggy.
Yeah.
Like, too bad, that's it, it's the game. Now I think about something like, Danny, you did that great no-clip documentary on Final Fantasy XIV, a game that launches, is a failure in many respects, and now, years later, has become one of the most popular MMOs ever made.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that goes to a part of this that we're talking about with the Hades stuff as well, where sometimes these games actually do need some of that feedback to become the game that the best version of themselves, you know? It's two things. It's on a technical side, it's making that game better and that gameplay experience that people want. And it's also that expectation. If you're asking people what they want and you're able to do it for them all the time, you're meeting them halfway or you're meeting their expectation.
I really hope over a long period of time that also just helps to change the relationship between players and games. And I hope that over a long period of time, you get enough players who've played something in early access, they find some game that they like that's changed over time, that they start to understand a little bit more about what goes into game development.
So I'm afraid that is all the time we got for this time. We could definitely go much more on this, but yeah, Austin, Danny, thanks so much for hanging out.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure, thank you.
And you, thanks for tuning in again, and definitely come back next time because there's way more to come on Reset, the unauthorized guide to video games.